My mother had a full life. A husband, children, neighbors, a job. By the time she turned 65, most of that was gone. Quietly, one by one. She never called it loneliness. She called it just getting older. But I think she deserved a better word for it.
Ryan, I have been sitting with that since you first told me you were opening with it, because I think so many of us have a version of that story. Welcome to Honestly English. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Ryan. We have real conversations about real life in real English. And today we're asking something that most people are too uncomfortable to say out loud. Why does loneliness after 60 feel so completely different from any loneliness that came before it? And why does almost nobody talk about it?
We are getting into the psychology behind it. We are going to talk about how friendships just quietly disappear, not with drama, not with a fight, just gone. And Ryan is going to share something about watching his mom that genuinely got to me when he told me.
You went very quiet.
I did. But stay with us, because there is a moment later where I talk about finally calling my dad after a long stretch of not really calling, and what happened in that call surprised me. I didn't expect to feel as much as I did.
So let's get into this properly. And I want to start with something that took me a long time to actually understand. When we talk about loneliness in younger people, say your 20s or 30s, it usually has a clear cause. You moved to a new city, you went through a bad breakup, you lost a friendship. You can point to the thing. And importantly, you can usually see a way out of it.
Right, because it feels temporary. I remember feeling so alone my first year after university, but I knew why. I kept telling myself, this is just a phase. It'll pass.
And that belief carries you. But loneliness after 60 is structurally different. It isn't caused by one event. It's caused by life slowly and methodically removing all the structures that kept you connected. And you don't notice it happening until one day the phone hasn't rung in 4 days, and nobody knew that but you.
That's such a quiet kind of grief, because you can't point to one thing. The job ended, your partner got sick, the kids moved to another city, your closest friend passed, the neighbor you used to have coffee with every Thursday moved into care. Each loss on its own, you manage, you adapt, but all of them layered on top of each other?
What you're left with is isolation. And the research here is genuinely striking. Studies consistently show that chronic loneliness in older adults has the same long-term health impact as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It raises cortisol, weakens immunity, and significantly increases the risk of cognitive decline.
15 cigarettes?
15 cigarettes every day. And yet we treat loneliness in older people like a natural consequence of aging, like it's inevitable, when actually it is a condition. It has causes and it has solutions.
But I think there's something sitting underneath all of that, which makes it even harder to address. And it's the shame, the deep shame of admitting that you feel lonely and invisible at 68 years old, after you raised children, built a career, survived everything life threw at you. There's this unspoken cultural idea that if you arrive at this stage of life and you're lonely, something went wrong. You failed at connection somehow.
And that is one of the cruelest parts of it. Because the generation that is most affected by this kind of isolation grew up in a world that treated vulnerability as weakness. So they don't say, I am lonely. They say, like my mom, I'm fine, or I don't want to be a burden, or they just redirect the conversation to you before you can ask a second question.
I don't want to be a burden. That one hits me directly, because that's exactly what my dad does. I'll call and ask how he's doing, and he'll say fine, and before I can follow up, he's asking about my week, my work, the kids. And for a long time, I read that as, that's just who he is. He's not a big talker. But now I think, how much of that is him protecting me from worrying? And how much of that is him protecting himself from feeling visible in something he's ashamed to feel?
Visible. That's such an important word here. One of the defining features of loneliness after 60 is this growing sense of invisibility, not just in social terms, but in a deeper, more existential way. The feeling that your presence in the world is slowly shrinking, that you matter less. And that feeds into depression and into what researchers call anticipatory grief, grieving losses that haven't fully arrived yet, but that you can already feel coming.
So they're not just processing what's already gone, they're already quietly mourning what they can sense is still coming.
Right. And when you carry that kind of weight alone, when belonging no longer feels guaranteed, the act of reaching out becomes almost impossibly heavy. Because to reach out is to risk being invisible in the reaching. And that rejection at that stage of life hits in a way it just didn't when you were 35.
And the friendship side of this is something I think about a lot, because the way friendships disappear after 60 is so different from how they disappear when you're young. When you're 28 and a friendship ends, something usually happened. There's a story. But after 60, friendships just drift into silence. Death takes some, illness takes some, distance takes some, and some just quietly stop because everyone is exhausted and nobody picked up the phone first. And one day you realize you haven't spoken in a year and a half, and neither of you made a move.
There's actually a term researchers use for this: friendship entropy, the natural tendency for social bonds to weaken over time without active maintenance. And the problem is that the older we get, the more intentional effort it takes to fight that entropy, and simultaneously, the fewer energy and fewer opportunities we have to do so. It's a genuine paradox.
And it raises the hardest question, right? What do you actually do? Because if you're someone listening who is thinking about a parent or a grandparent, or honestly, maybe about yourself, it can feel overwhelming. Like, where do you even begin when so much is already quietly gone?
I think it starts with a mindset shift. And this is where understanding my mom actually helped me. She used to say she didn't want to go to a community group or a seniors center. It felt desperate to her. And I understood that on an emotional level. But what I eventually came to understand is that she had inherited this idea that meaningful connection should arrive naturally, the way it did when she was in her 40s and surrounded by people by default, through work, through the school run, through the neighborhood.
But those default structures are gone.
Completely gone. And so the shift that actually matters is this: intentional connection is not desperate. Intentional connection is what emotionally intelligent adults who understand how life actually works choose to do. The most socially healthy older adults are not the ones who waited for belonging to find them. They are the ones who built deliberate routines around it: a regular walk, a standing commitment, a space they returned to.
That reframe genuinely helped me, because I think I have had this subtle, uncomfortable feeling about, like, a senior community event. Some quiet part of me thought, oh, that's sad. But that's my bias, isn't it? That's me projecting something onto it that says more about my own fears than it does about the actual value of those spaces.
It is. And those spaces, when they're good, give people exactly what humans need at a biological level: repeated contact, shared purpose, a sense that they belong somewhere. The research on belonging is remarkably consistent. It is not a social luxury. It is a fundamental human need, as real and as urgent as food or sleep.
We were literally built for community. And what breaks my heart about loneliness after 60 is that these are often people who spent decades building for everyone else, their partners, their children, their workplaces, and when that scaffolding gets taken away, they genuinely do not know how to build for themselves anymore.
And that is the real center of this, I think. And I'll say this as gently as I can. The people in our lives who are older and quietly isolated do not usually need us to fix anything. What they need is for us to be present, to show up with enough consistency that they stop feeling invisible.
Yeah, that lands.
Okay, let's make this practical, because I think this conversation could get very heavy very fast, and I want us to leave people with actual things they can do, whether you are the person who is experiencing this kind of isolation, or someone who loves someone who might be.
Yes, and I'll say these came directly from conversations we had about our own families. So these are not theoretical. These are things we've actually tried.
First tip, lower the bar for reaching out dramatically. Because one of the biggest reasons people don't connect is that reaching out feels like it requires a reason or a block of time or something meaningful to say. And that pressure is what kills the momentum before anything even starts. What actually works is small contact, a text, a voice note, a photo of something that made you think of them. You are not bothering anyone. You are giving them the gift of presence.
I started sending my dad voice notes instead of waiting until I had a full 20 minutes to really call. And the first time I did it, just 2 minutes, me talking about nothing, he sent one back. He had never sent a voice note in his entire life. It was 40 seconds of him telling me about the tomatoes he was growing. And I sat in my car and listened to it twice. It was everything.
Tomatoes. That is the content right there.
That is the content.
Second tip. For older adults specifically, look for structures, not events. Events are great, a family dinner, a birthday, a holiday visit, but they are not enough on their own to build real belonging. What builds a genuine sense of community is showing up somewhere regularly. A weekly class, a walking group, a book club, a volunteer shift at the library. It doesn't matter what it is. What matters is that you go back. Repeated contact is what turns a room full of strangers into a place where someone knows your name.
This is a slow burn, and I think it's worth naming that because people try something once, feel awkward and out of place, and decide it's not for them. But that awkward first visit is almost universal. You have to give it 3 or 4 visits before something starts to shift. Don't write it off after one shot.
One shot is never enough data.
Never.
Third tip, and this one is specifically for people who have a parent or older family member who seems withdrawn or quiet. Don't wait for them to ask for connection. I know that sounds obvious, but here's the thing. People who feel invisible often genuinely believe they don't have the right to ask. They don't want to be a burden, so they stay silent. And the people around them read that silence as, she's fine, or he just likes his space.
The silence is not fine. The silence is protection.
So you become the one who makes the plan. Not, let me know if you ever want company. That is kind, but it hands the burden right back to them. Instead, I'm coming over Saturday afternoon. Is that okay? A specific plan, a specific day. You took the weight off them.
I used to do the let me know thing with my mom after she moved to a smaller town. She would always say, "Oh, don't go out of your way, I'm fine." And I took her at her word for way too long. Now I just call and say, "I'm coming next weekend." That's the conversation. She doesn't have to ask. She doesn't have to feel like a burden. I just show up.
And hey, if this is the kind of conversation that matters to you, subscribing to the channel means you never miss one. We do this 3 times a week, every week, because we think these conversations are genuinely worth having.
Fourth tip, help the people you love find language for what they're feeling. Because one of the loneliest things about loneliness after 60 is that people often don't have words for it. They don't have vocabulary for the particular grief of watching a social world slowly disappear, a world that took them a lifetime to build. And when you cannot name something, you cannot talk about it. And when you cannot talk about it, it just sits there.
And this connects back to the shame piece. Because if nobody around you ever talks about loneliness openly, if it's treated as an embarrassing private problem, you don't feel like you have permission to bring it up either. So sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is say it first. Give them the words. I imagine sometimes it must feel really quiet now, and I just want you to know that's okay to say.
You open the door. You don't push them through it. You just open it.
Fifth tip, and this one is for everyone. Stay genuinely curious about the older people in your life, not just about their health, but about their inner life. Because one of the most painful dimensions of invisibility is when the people around you stop being curious about what you're thinking and feeling, and only ask how your back is doing or whether you've taken your medication. And slowly, you stop being a person with a perspective. You become just a body to be checked on.
When I started asking my dad things like, "What have you been thinking about lately?" or "Is there something you've been wanting to talk about?" I was genuinely not prepared for what came back. He had all these thoughts and memories and opinions he'd been carrying around quietly for years. Nobody had given him a space to put them. And it wasn't sad, well, it was a little sad, but mostly it was just rich. He has lived an entire life. There is so much in there.
People are full of experience, and the real antidote to feeling invisible is being seen. And being seen begins with someone deciding to look. So our question for you today is there someone in your life right now who might be lonelier than they're letting on? And what is one thing you could do this week?
If I'm really honest, it's my aunt. She lost her husband just under 2 years ago, and she still talks to me like life restructured itself and she adapted just fine. But the last time I visited, she walked me out to my car and she stood there a little longer than she needed to. She wasn't ready for me to leave, and I drove home thinking about that for the whole journey. I think I have been telling myself she's okay because it's easier for me to believe that. So this week, I'm calling her on Tuesday, not to check in, not to run through a list, just to be present, to ask her what she's been thinking about.
Mine is my mom. It's always my mom when I sit with a question like this. And what I've been realizing lately is that the moments she seems most herself, most alive in a conversation, are the times I'm not efficient on the call, when I'm not calling to check in and then looking for the exit, when I just let it breathe, let her take it wherever she wants to take it, a show she's been watching, something she read, something she remembered. And I've started to understand that the greatest gift I can offer her right now isn't my advice or my help or my solutions. It's my unhurried attention, just my presence. She has earned that 1,000 times over.
Tell us your answer in the comments. We read every one.
If today helped you, share it with someone who needs it. New episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. See you in the next episode.
Connection isn't something that just happens to us. It's something we have to keep choosing. So choose someone this week.